So we'll try and skip through that in 5 or 10 minutes. We'll give you a chance to ask any sort of brief questions, and then we're going to hand over to Orange Compass, and the bulk of today's session is really going to be going through the EOI form and working through that with you and making sure that we have plenty of time for questions and discussion. So I'm going to hand over now to Emma, who's just going to take us through some background on the DRF itself, just to set us up for the session. Oh, and can I just check that everyone's okay with, we are planning to record today's session, just so that it's available online. If you have any concerns with that, let us know, but hopefully that is okay with everyone. So over to you, Emma.
Okay, hi everyone, good morning. So I'll just start off with a quick recap on the dates. All of this information is on our website and it's also in our New South Wales guidance document. So the EOI is currently open and we have our New South Wales guidance document that's been released. Our EOI is going to close on the 8th of December and it's going to close at 12 noon, if I can just make that really clear. So it's going to close at lunchtime on the 8th of December and you need to make yourself available. If you're successful in the EOI, be available in January to fill in the final application form. Okay, so the DRF objectives, we've gone through these in the previous sessions and they're in the guidance document as well. So it's about increasing the understanding, resilience, and reducing exposure, risk or harm of natural hazards. Okay, so eligibility criteria, again, I'll just call out our New South Wales guidance document. So just a brief recap on the eligibility criteria. So projects in round 2 will need to be up to a maximum of 3 years. They need to align with the program objectives, which is those 3 objectives in the previous slide. The projects need to target an eligible hazard type. So there are a list of hazard types that are eligible and it's similar to round 1. And the projects also need to be targeting one eligible stream. So stream 1 or stream 2, and I'll go into that in the next slide. So projects also need to be risk informed in accordance with the Commonwealth Government or NEMA's investment principles, which will go further into detail in this session. The projects also need to be aligned with plans, and for place-based projects and infrastructure projects, there are some additional requirements, but we will go further into detail in this session. So these are the 2 streams that I'd mentioned previously. So in round 2, your project will need to fit into at least one of these streams. So stream 1 is infrastructure, and these are, and so, sorry, the aims of that the projects will need to align with is resilience and preparedness, reduction of risk. There's also stream 2, which is about systemic risk reduction. So these are projects that will build the long-term sustainability of communities. And once you've selected a stream, you then need to align with a category. So this is stream 1, infrastructure. So infrastructure projects can either be of a built component or it can be about building a business case. So for example, modelling or concept and detailed design. We do have the definitions of grey infrastructure, blue-green infrastructure, and also nature-based solutions on our website. So in the FAQ section, if you're looking for that, it's on our website. Yeah, and as Fiona said, if you have any questions along the way, just pop them in the chat and then we can answer them at the end. So stream 2, this is the systemic risk reduction stream. So the categories here where your project would need to align to one of these. So it could be about building a better evidence base. It could be projects that deliver inclusive plans at the household or community levels. It could be strengthening government decision-making through governance networks, communities of practice, adaptation projects, social projects that build capacity to improve resilience and preparedness in communities, or projects that enable and incentivise private investment in disaster risk reduction. Co-contributions. So this has been largely where a lot of questions we've had to date have been. It's similar to round 1 where you need to all projects need to provide some sort of co-contribution, but this time around we are giving you 3 options to select from. So when you do fill in your form, you'll see you're asked to select one of these 3 options. So the first one is that you have 50%, that you're going to contribute 50% of your eligible project costs. If you're unable to provide that 50% co-contribution, we've given you the option to nominate that you'd like to apply for a New South Wales state co-contribution, which means you would still provide 25% of your eligible co-contribution, and then the state government, if you're successful, would look to provide the other 25%. But just making you aware here that if you do select this option, it will be factored into the value for money assessment at the screening stage. And the final option is same as round 1, where you can request from the Commonwealth Government a waiver or a partial waiver in the co-contribution. And again, you can select this option in the form, our EOI form. And we for this option, I can just read out, just to give a little bit more clarity on what exceptional circumstances are. Because it is a Commonwealth Government decision, we are just using the words that they have been putting forward to us to date. So what they have made clear is that recent natural disasters or high recent disaster expenditure will not qualify as exceptional circumstances. They will be looking for further information for projects that request this in terms of evidence to justify the waiver request. So they need evidence of the demonstrated need, evidence of the project impact. So the project must have significant impact. Delivery challenges may be faced by the project. Potentially the project is remote and suffers some delivery challenges, or there's particular vulnerabilities within the community that your project will be assisting.
And Emma, there's just a question come through the chat from Daryl about when calculating co-contribution, how far back can costs be accounted for?
Yes.
So it's July 2020, isn't it?
Yeah, so Daryl, it's July 2020. And you can see there it does say only where the Commonwealth Government's DRF contribution is expected to extend or enhance that project, and then it's in alignment with the DRF objectives. So that date is 1st of July 2020.
Yep, and Ali's asked a question about, does requesting a waiver from the Commonwealth Government also factor into the VFM assessment? Yes, it does, Ali. It's not a sort of a huge black mark or anything like that, but we do take it into account in the overall screening criteria.
Yeah. Okay, so co-contributions. Yeah, so similar to, Daryl's question, yep, so that is the date, the 1st of July 2020 for prior spend. You can also do direct cash from the date that, let's say you start your funding agreement, you're going to be providing cash to the project. Eligible co-contribution would also be costs that are associated with the project's delivery. In kind, so this is really important, that in-kind costs can be considered a co-contribution. So that might be wages that you can attribute to the delivery of the project, or supplies, materials that you're going to use to execute the project. And just similar to round 1, the Commonwealth Government is stating that Commonwealth funding from any source, including historical, cannot be used as a co-contribution. So if you've received a grant or DRFA funding from the Commonwealth, that can't be considered as part of your co-contribution. Okay, so this time,
So Emma, so there's just one more, just while we're on co-contributions, there's just one more. So Daryl, you've also asked, can co-contributions also take into consideration ongoing allocated recurrent funds? So, I mean, the answer to that really is it depends. So any in-kind contribution needs to be directly attributable to the project. That's the kind of key principle to think about. And the kind of previous expenditure, I think we've sort of outlined the key elements there, but it needs to be considered a kind of a continuation of a project which that previous spend relates to. Hopefully that answers your question. Sorry, Emma, go ahead.
Okay, so this time around we have some mandatory screening criteria, so it's similar to eligibility criteria. So these two slides, it's really important that your project can demonstrate these two things, and we will go into further detail with Orange Compass later in the session. But the first one is risk informed, which aligns to the Commonwealth Government's investment principle that they've put forward. So you need to be able to demonstrate that your project is informed by risk. So you have identified the risk that you're addressing in your project location, that you are drawing on risk evidence to build the case for your project, and that you're able to articulate the disaster risk prior to your project and upon conclusion of your proposed project. If your project is addressing something where there is no existing disaster risk assessment tool, or there's very limited understanding of the risk, you can also provide a sufficient explanation as to how your project will contribute to the assessment of that risk and increase the understanding of natural hazard disaster impacts. So either you're aligning your project, you're drawing on evidence to build the case for your project, or you're articulating that your project that doesn't exist, and your project is going to be contributing to that disaster evidence. Okay, this is the second mandatory screening criteria. Again, it's alignment with the Commonwealth Government investment principle aligned with plans. So this one here, we're asking that your projects are aligning to an existing national, state, local or community hazard mitigation, resilient plan, policies or frameworks. So you're identifying the plans that your project aligns to and how it does. Just calling out that there is the second National Action Plan. So I encourage you to take a look at that, because most projects should in some way be able to align with at least that plan. But basically your project needs to align with a plan. So there needs to be a strategic reason for your project. Or if there are no plans that your project aligns to, you need to demonstrate how your project will develop or contribute to the development of these plans, policies or frameworks. Okay, and then the next slide here is inclusion criteria. So basically, while the risk informed and the align with plans were mandatory, so you need to ensure that your project can demonstrate those two things. This here is, you can see it as sort of the merit assessment. So this is where you need to build the case that your project has clear impact and outcomes. And you can see some dot points here, how you can demonstrate that. And today we will go into quite a bit of detail about how you can demonstrate that. Your project needs to, there needs to be a need for your project. So it needs to be delivering on an unmet need or identified gap in the location. So it can't be a round peg in a square hole. There needs to be a community need for your project, and your project needs to be the right one filling that gap. The project needs to represent value for money, and you can see there the co-contribution provided is factored into that assessment. So if you are requesting the 25% co-contribution from New South Wales State Government, that would be factored in at that point. And the last merit screening or the inclusion screening is capacity and the capability to deliver. So basically ensuring that you have the ability to follow through on your project, that your project can be completed in 3 years, that you have the right people and skills involved, and that you've considered the risks relevant to your project. Where to go for further information? So please check out our website. It does have quite a lot of FAQs that you can probably find a lot of information or questions that you've already been asking yourself. It's got the New South Wales guidance document. So that document is absolutely critical when you're filling in your EOI application form. And then lastly, you can always contact us via email. We're here if you have any further tricky questions that aren't already answered. So I think we have some time now. Is that right, Fiona, for some questions?
We have answered.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess we've answered a few on the way through. So if there are no questions, that is also fine, and we can move on to the next section. We are going to make the slides available.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we will make the slides after the
I think
session.
there was one question here, and sorry if I lost track. So I think we dealt with the Ken Code contribution, take into consideration ongoing allocation of recurrent funds. There was another question around, are there any limitations to using New South Wales funds as a co-contribution from various other programs, for example, funding provided through the Climate Change Fund? So I don't know if there's any more framing you can provide around the co-contribution piece there.
Yeah, sure. Did you want to answer that one, Emma?
Yeah, we do have that on our website actually, but so I guess the key things is that date, the 1st of July 2020. There is a question in the EOI form that asks, is the DRF fund the best source of funds for this project? So I guess, being able to answer that question, is this, can this project be funded through a different source? Is a different source more relevant? So being able to answer that question.
Yeah, I think there's also a piece in there about, so Stuart, if you're talking about, if the climate change is a state-based fund, basically what you just need to make sure that the conditions of that fund allow for it to be utilised as a co-contribution for another fund. If it's a federal fund, then no, it can't be used for co-contributions. So the key message is just, just go and check with the conditions of that fund and make sure that it's suitable for use as a co-contribution.
And the other piece, I guess, just that we've got on our website in relation to that, and which we did have on that slide, is that the DRF funding is expected to extend or enhance whatever that existing program is, for example. Just look for further questions. Is it mandatory to demonstrate consultation with First Nations people and communities for the EOI? That's from Erin. Yes, so Erin, if your project impacts upon a First Nations community or peoples, then yes, we would require that you would have consulted and provide evidence of that in the EOI form.
There's one here on if an agency is submitting multiple cases, will each case be reviewed on its own merit, or will prioritisation be done to pick only one or two from each agency? For example, if you submit multiple cases, will it reduce the likelihood of getting the most critical case? So who does the prioritisation is the question, I think.
Yeah, so Alexander, if by cases you mean projects, I'll just sort of answer that, assuming that's what you mean there. Essentially the screening that the Reconstruction Authority conducts will basically make a recommendation as to whether projects are suitable or not suitable for the application. But if you're submitting multiple submissions, as in separate submissions, then we don't kind of consider how the two will be considered on their merits, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answers your question. But we're not, even in the, when we get to doing the full application to the Commonwealth, what the Commonwealth have indicated to us, whereas last time we actually had to prioritise projects, we're not being asked to do that this time around.
Regarding staff, do you want details such as title, experience, qualifications? I think we covered that in Orange Compass's presentation next, but basically you could link to your LinkedIn profile. I think you can upload that section. So potentially CVs as well as details of other successful projects. Successful proposals. So in mid-January, we're expecting successful EOIs would be announced, and then those who have been successful would then be looking to complete the proposal, something that we're calling the proposal. Successful proposals, that would only be determined by the Commonwealth Government, and we would say, I think we're saying April.
All to be determined. So yeah, the time frame at this stage is going to be late Jan. We will be making a determination on the EOIs. We'll be advising successful and unsuccessful applicants to the EOI late Jan, and then successful applicants to the EOI will basically get on and start developing their full application. That will be announced by the Commonwealth Government in late January. So we'll be timing our communications with all of you with the timing of the full application process, which is managed by NEMA. And we are expecting that they will make, so those submissions will be submitted as in the New South Wales application will be submitted in April. We expect them to be announcing successful projects in July next year.
There's just one more question there from Daryl. Is it sufficient to advise that previous funding requests have been unsuccessful, even at the state government level?
If this is to demonstrate that this is the best funding source,
I see.
I would go further than that to you know, why does it align to this fund? Why is it needed? You really need to present the cases. Yeah. So in this form, it's just a question, is this the best funding source? But
yeah, I think really what we're asking for there is just to make sure that you've gone through that thought process, that the DRF is the best source of funding. So, you know, as opposed to other sources of funding like DRFA, event-specific funding that may be available. So it's just really for proponents to demonstrate that, yeah, I've had to think about this, and in terms of what I want to put forward, the DRF is really the best source of funding for this particular project.
So Havish is asking if there's any way to access previous successful EOIs or case studies, but maybe that's a good point to head into Ali's presentation, which will take us through the actual form and show everyone, you know, some good ways to answer the questions within the form.
Beautiful. Thanks, Emma. We will just share our slides. So hello, everyone. I'm Ali from Orange Compass, and as Barney said, Fiona's here with me. Today, we have been lucky enough to support DRF round 1, and now going into DRF round 2, can see the significant changes that have been made to the process, basically to help proponents hopefully get a steer in a much easier time frame than last time. So we're just going to share our slide deck, and basically the purpose of our piece of the puzzle is to really go through the EOI form and give you a chance to understand what the application requirements are and what each kind of question is looking for. So hopefully this will give you a bit more information. But I just want to do a bit of a shout out to the team because, as I said, last round was quite compressed. This time round, the team's worked really hard to put in a 2-phase process, which will hopefully help proponents think through their projects early, have a lengthier kind of application time to get resources and evidence together, and to consult with the people that they need in their project. The team have also made it quite word limited, the EOI process. So just noting that you have to be very clear and concise with the information that you're putting in, because there are quite strict word limits in it. And as Emma said, a lot of the work is in the front end of the document around screening, eligibility criteria, and it's got lots of drop-down boxes and lots of things for you just to tick your way through to make sure that you're kind of all set up for success at the start. Are you okay, Fiona, to share, or are you having an issue? Oh, beautiful. We can run through these ones and get into the form. And a lot of the questions there around what does the EOI form look like? What do I need to provide? And where do I go for information in this presentation? So this will be great. So keep going, Fiona. We've sort of, I just want to, like, my background is in grants management on both sides of the fence. And so understanding your need and making sure that you're addressing that gap and putting your best foot forward with lots of evidence support, what you're trying to do is really what the assessment panel are going to be looking for. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're thinking through your projects. So if we move to the next slide, as I said, a lot of that information, eligibility stuff and who you're working with, who your project lead is, all that kind of stuff's done in the first part of the document. And then we get into sort of, I guess, the meatier piece of the EOI form, which is really trying to articulate this risk-informed approach to your projects. And so, as Barney and Emma have said, the Australian government has released the investment principles this time round, and risk informed is their key one at the start. So this section is all about trying to give the assessment panel that kind of information. I'm getting a little bit of background noise, so just chuck yourself on mute if you aren't already. That would be wonderful. Okay, so once you've identified your relevant hazard, and as Emma said, exposure to that hazard and vulnerabilities, so whether that's people, economy, ecology, or the built environment, really about trying to provide some evidence and data to support that that project claim. So things that we're pointing you towards are things like local and regional flood mitigation studies or plans, local or regional hazard risk assessments or bushfire plans, depending on your hazard. And we've also, when you're thinking through what evidence or documents that might help provide that evidence, there's lots of wonderful things that have gone beforehand. So that could be program evaluations. So we've just popped an example in there, the Hawkesbury Nepean Valley Flood Management Study, but it could also be, I think somebody asked in the questions around EOI, like case studies or things that have that your organisation might have been working on in this field to provide that evidence or that background. So if we go to the next slide, there's heaps of information out there, and you're probably all very, I know I'm talking to a very specific audience today, being the state agencies, but there's some fantastic resources available on the Australian Institute of Disaster Resilience website, and they've got a whole knowledge hub there that can support you when you're looking for evidence or data or information. So they've got a whole section on a handbook collection, which includes a systemic disaster risk handbook. There's a national emergency risk assessment guidelines in there. There's also the guidance on strategic decisions and climate and disaster risk. So we are pointing people there to really help think about that risk-informed approach to your project. So that is yes, quite word limited and need to be specific, but you've got 200 words in those project questions. So that's, and then adding 2 documents. At the national level, and we've popped it in the chat, the second national...
Ali,
yes,
sorry.
Jump in,
can I just jump in there for a sec? Just to be clear on the sort of risk-informed piece, I think we're not expecting necessarily that within the EOI timeframe that people are going to be going out there and doing comprehensive risk assessments. We know that some of you will have access already to that kind of data, but and if you do, that's fantastic. You know, we would expect that at the state government level to a degree, depending on the field that you're working on or in. But really what we're doing is just providing you with some additional guidance, some sources that you could draw on, you know, if this is not your kind of area of expertise, and really encouraging you to sort of think through those different elements of just being really clear about what's the hazard you're addressing, what's the exposure to that hazard, and what are the specific vulnerabilities that you're addressing. And then if you can draw on evidence to back up that thinking, then that's the kind of thing that we're sort of looking for as an ideal response. So thanks, Ali. And then I think we were, just talking about alignment with plans as well.
Yeah, so the next investment principle is around that alignment to plans. And as the team have said, the second National Action Plan is available, and we've popped that in the chat. And that's a fantastic framing document. It's got 4 priority areas, 9 outcome areas, and 24 actions. So you should be able to see your project somewhere in that framework. We just thought it'd be good to, like, as in, you will be able to hopefully naturally align with that plan and draw on some of that language and information that's in there to hopefully frame up this this part of the form. Just when you get into outcomes, we don't need a big list of activities. We need to really think about your project's impact. So in terms of delivering on whether it's a local, state, or the TUNAP, what is your project's outcome? So what is going to happen as a result of it? So just, there is a bigger hierarchy, I guess, and a lot more information than there was in DRF round 1 to draw on. So really use it, I guess, in terms of your proposal. So not to move away, there's obviously a lot of planning in this space. And I don't know, Barney, if you want to just talk to the state plans that we've got at the moment, and then sort of this, what the RA is doing in this space.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ali. So we've just put up some examples here of plans that you may want to reference. Some of you, will be intimately familiar with these plans or may have even been involved in developing some of them. There's obviously the Sendai framework at the international level, which the TUNAP is based on to a degree. So we put up some of those other kind of strategies and plans there that sit in and around the DRR space, if you like. As most of, or if not all of you will be aware, 2 of the key pieces that the Reconstruction Authority is charged with is developing the State Disaster Mitigation Plan and the Disaster Adaptation Plans. The DAPs will sort of follow the release of the SDMP, but the State Disaster Mitigation Plan will kind of set the overarching framework for risk reduction in the state. And I'm sure many of you have been engaged in that process already. And the DAPs will be more plans that get rolled out, working with councils and or JOs at a local and regional level. So we just wanted to sort of highlight, I guess, that obviously those pieces are not available yet. We will work with all of the projects that end up getting funded to ensure alignment with those plans as much as possible. But one of the key pieces just to note is that any work that will support the development, particularly of DAPs, whether that be building background evidence at a local or regional level, or helping councils kind of build their capacity and capability to deliver on the DAPs, will be looked on favourably by the Commonwealth. So back to you, Ali.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Barney. And then I guess at that regional and local level, the New South Wales Planning's got the regional plans on their website, which are fantastic and detailed. We've got councils' community strategic plans or local strategic planning statements, which are available on their websites. And then obviously there's a lot of community work with resilience plans in this space as well. And then again, I think there was a question around First Nations. Aboriginal community action plans are also there. So the first point of call is usually the LAUC website for that kind of information. So there is a lot out there and a lot of information to draw on to support your expression of interest. So if we move to project need, I know we touched on this in Emma's presentation previously, but really articulating where is the demand, who wants this project, being really clear with your why. And we've talked about, can this project be funded elsewhere, but, just really articulating why a state response for this audience is needed or best placed to to respond to the hazard or to develop a statewide mitigation strategy, depending on your focus. I guess, what is the gap you're addressing? So is it information, knowledge, evidence or data? Is it infrastructure resilience? Is it capacity and capability? Is it work around governance or networks? So just being really clear with the need. If you are a state-based organisation working in a local context, just making sure that that place-based nuance to the project is clearly articulated. And I know that's a lot in 100 words, but just being really clear on that need. And there's some tools. We've got a bit of a tool here just to help with looking through that. And this might be good to do with your project team or project partners, but through a lens of desirability, viability and feasibility. In project design is often a good way to test and develop ideas. So desirability, is there an appetite and do target groups want it? So who needs it, who wants it? And then viability, will the numbers work? So is the project stack up in terms of capacity and resources that you've got on hand? Feasibility, can we deliver it? And as Emma said, the 3-year time frame, and then everything else that's going on in the world contributing to that. And then where all that aligns, talking about your overall impact. So will it create change? So looking at, what your project ultimately is trying to achieve. So that might be useful in terms of just constructing that sort of first thinking, because the next part of the form, which everybody loves, is around project logic. And this is particularly just for the systemic risk or infrastructure business case projects only, so not for infrastructure. And it takes you through, if anybody applied for DRF round 1 or a Commonwealth grant, it takes you through your logic or how your project hangs together. So thinking through your inputs, your outputs in terms of activities, in terms of participation, looking through how your short-term outcomes, so what are you seeing in the project early on, through to your medium outcomes. So if you've got a 3-year project, you might start seeing some of that, and then checking your assumptions and your longer term goal and external factors. So this part of the form really takes you through that chunky piece of it, and the team's done a great job of, it's very word limited, so you're going to have to be very clear and articulate with your activities. But we're going to now just, I'm going to hand over to Fiona, because Orange Compass does a lot of work in this space, and this is often very, very tricky for people to articulate well and get them over the line. So we're going to give you some, hopefully, some useful little tools that might help design your project. So Fiona.
Thanks, Ali. As Ali said, you are a highly skilled audience. We don't assume that you don't know this, but it never hurts to have a little bit of a refresh. So we'll just go through this briefly. As you can see in the project logic, the snapshot of the form, there is a request for a problem statement. And what I'm going to share with you first up, if I can make the slides move, is just a really simple template. Each of the templates we're sharing them because we know you're probably going to have to talk to your team. You might have to talk to other stakeholders. And a lot of the work in this is actually that collaborative piece. How do you have conversations to quickly figure out what is it you're actually applying for and how to make that compelling? So this example of defining the why with a problem statement, if you've already thought about the points above, which Ali just spoke to, around what is the need, is it desirable, who are the target groups, then you're already halfway there. So the problem statement is a really nice way to summarise what is the change you're trying to achieve, what is the way you're trying to do it or the thing you're trying to shift, and then why. So often you can come back to this at the end of having gone through the program logic, but again, just offering it as a really simple template and example of how you can pull together it's almost an elevator pitch in some ways, which will also help with the word count as well. So simple example of a problem statement. What I'm going to go through firstly, before we jump into some more around program logic, is also just recapping what we mean by some of the terms. So for those of you who are experienced in program logics and theories of change, they're very, very similar. The theory of change part is essentially mapping out the outcomes, the story of change you're trying to make. A program logic is a little bit more developed because it actually spells out inputs and activity as well. So don't worry too much about the language, but in simple terms, if I could provide an example. So an output is what you've actually produced. So for example, if your activity is, we want to run an education program because we want to shift local population's behaviour around disaster risk. The education program might be the activity, the output is the workshops. It might be the workshops you run, the number of people that complete the course, all those sorts of things are essentially outputs, they're numbers of deliverables. Outcomes are the actual change you want to see. So what does success look like? The reason we try and work this out is we're trying to establish a causal link, a really clear story about how does your activities, how does the investment in the work that you do actually lead to a change? And the way we try and do that is we ask for really clear linkages between the outputs and the sort of outcomes. You would be surprised how many times I see statements like, we will run 3 workshops and this will change the world. And my answer is always, I think you've missed a step in there somewhere. There's actually some miracle leaps or heroic assumptions. I'll pause here on the term assumption as well. So this is about things being plausible. Most good program logics include a set of assumptions. These aren't about you making mistakes. They're about your best guesses based on the conditions you think will exist in the world. So, for example, you might make an assumption, if we stick with the education program example, that participants will go to this course. A, they're going to turn up because it's in person and nobody likes online. That might be an assumption you make. But also, once they've done the study, they actually get a chance to apply their learnings in the real world. For whatever reason, the opportunity exists for them to actually embed their learnings and maybe even talk to their neighbours. And we might have this view that somehow it goes from 20 participants to a whole community suddenly change what it's doing. So there'll be a set of assumptions about the real world. Assumptions like we'll get bipartisan support, we'll have ongoing funding, we'll have co-investment. Some of those you have greater certainty about. We usually list the assumptions that are good guesses, but for which we can't control. So it's not about judging you or saying you're right or wrong. It's actually just showing acknowledgement that you understand that if the external environment changes or if your cause and effect doesn't quite work out, you're actually going to be willing to adapt because you've recognised the key links that you're trying to create. So stating your assumptions is not about trying to show that you don't know what you're doing. It's about showing that you actually do. So all of that, again, just offering a brainstorming tool, because all of that language can sound quite theoretical and a little bit tricky. So should you want to brainstorm this with your team, with others around you, often it's nice to think about North Star and Near Star and then stepping stones. So the way we do that is we might, at the bottom of this page, you can see, yep, we've got a whole lot of things we're actually going to do in the world. That's essentially the bottom half of a program logic, your inputs, your outputs, your activities, et cetera, et cetera. How do you actually think about outcomes in a way that tells a good story? Well, firstly, we think about, if we're going from the bottom up, there'll be some early wins and early instances of impact. So short-term outcomes are, if we think about as signals that might suggest we're on a pathway to impact, an early win might be in, I'm going to stick with the education example, participants turned up, they reported they have a much better understanding now of how to respond or how to prevent or mitigate disaster, just as an example. Stepping stones to bigger impact is, if we want to get to a big shift in the world, what's that middle step? So this is the bit where stepping stones are actually your trickiest bit. It's easy to talk about, I want to change the world and I'm going to run a workshop. It's what's the middle bit? So stepping stones to sustained impact is about how do you contribute to cumulative impacts? What other ongoing impacts might there be? So, for example, in an educational setting, it might be that word spreads through friendship groups and peer networks and communities of practice. And there are all sorts of things we're doing to help spread the word. It might be there's second enrolment rounds. There's all sorts of things building the movement around this new way of thinking about disaster risk. And then your near star, we talk about near star and North Star. Your near star is the last thing you can control. So your end of program or long-term outcomes are what can you realistically hope to see as change out in the world because of the work you've done. That's distinct from North Star, which is your big high-level change. You know, we all want to make the world a better place. We want to make New South Wales safer. All those things, which is nice to have as an aspiration, but it's not something we can do alone. It's something we might contribute to. That's quite distinct from a near star end of program outcome, which might be, you know, for the northwest of New South Wales, you know, the majority of communities have fundamentally changed the way they work and manage and mitigate risks. That might be your near star, and you can actually prove you've had some contribution to that in a unique way. So I hope that makes sense, but it doesn't have to be scary. The early wins, the stepping stones, the near star and the North Star can be a really useful way just to talk through what's that chain of cause and effect, what's our story of change over time. Ali, I think you were going to talk this one through.
Beautiful. So thanks, Fiona. And I just note that there's been a few things happening in the chat, which we will just we will acknowledge when we get to the next bit on infrastructure projects. So this is just an example, and we tried to make up something to kind of support your thinking in this DRR space. So if we have an example project, we're doing a behaviour change campaign for land managers to increase regional adoption of nature-based solutions for disaster preparedness. So that's our kind of big, audacious kind of goal and our program. What does our program logic look like to support that? So what do we need? So in terms of our inputs, we need some skilled staff. We're thinking events, some event management would be wonderful, some funding to make it all happen, some communications because it's a behaviour change campaign. We need some subject matter experts, some partnerships, particularly because we don't think we can do it on our own. We need a designer, we need some printed materials, and we need some paper. So we need all of these inputs to kind of get our ingredients going for our project. In terms of outputs, what are we looking for in terms of delivering? And as Fiona said, we're going to be doing some workshops, some education resources. We're going to have a really interactive website where people can go to get information. We're going to have a regionally based facilitator network so that we've got boots on the ground. And we're going to have some trial sites so people can actively see what's going on. So a short-term outcome, what I'd love to see while I'm delivering this project and have people doing, I guess, is positive engagement and growing understanding about disaster risk and ways to prepare and mitigate nature-based risks across some regions. So we're going to try and do this across in some pilots to get it going. Medium-term outcome, we might see uptake and adoption of nature-based practices by land managers for disaster preparedness. So really, we're starting to see some action and adoption. And then our long-term impact is that land managers across New South Wales are more resilient to natural disasters through widespread adoption of nature-based solutions, implementing risk reduction activities and behaviours for disaster risk preparedness. So trying to say that, you know, that resilience is now being met through practice. So that's just a little example. I'm hoping that kind of gets you thinking of how your project, particularly in this systemic risk area, if you're doing projects around behaviour change and what you want to see long term, that kind of gives you a bit of an example. So we're going to move now into the infrastructure only. And there was a comment in the chat, and I think Barney did a great job of responding to it. But if you've got a systemic risk project or infrastructure business cases, you will answer the project logic question. If you're just going to build something, so infrastructure only, you get taken to this question, which is around stages or developing milestones. So that happens in the EOI form. So I just wanted to pause here, and if you are thinking that you are your project is focused solely on infrastructure, on building something, can you give me a bit of an indication by putting up your hand or giving me a thumbs up? Yeah, beautiful, to see who is kind of looking at just infrastructure only, and that just gives me a good indication of how much time I should spend on these couple of slides. Oh, there's a few there.
There's a few, Ali, yeah, a few thumbs up.
Yeah, great. Okay, so this, I mean, this will be not anything new to any of you, but this is very much breaking down the stages of your projects into milestones. And the team have got key activities, deliverables, expected completion date. So looking at this your project plan and breaking that down, some examples of how you might pop that together is looking at sections like program initiation, some planning and design, implementation and delivery, evaluation, and close, like particularly reporting, because obviously reporting is very much part of the granting cycle, and that can take a lot of time and resources. So making sure that that is accounted for in there. in terms of deliverables, people can sometimes get a little bit mixed up between what their milestone is, what their activity is versus what the concrete thing is that you're going to be delivering. So just calling that out, that, you know, that's things like a project plan, a feasibility study, contractor agreements with suppliers. That's hard evidence that the team can see that will be produced, if you like. And then, yeah, so that's kind of all I want to say. That obviously I'm not saying anything new to anyone, but really this is the project stages where you get to put your project plan down in kind of action. The next question for infrastructure only, this is sort of what the section looks like in the EOI form for those who haven't gone in and had a look at the form, but it's got a whole you can kind of work your way through and upload your documents as required there, very straightforward. And then there's a confidence in costings piece, which we just thought we'd call out because otherwise everybody might just say they're very confident. So trying to put some parameters around that is, so not confident is around if you're just early stages, no design briefs, approvals or quotes. Some weren't confident in your costings. You've got a design brief approved. You might be out for tender for the construction. The planning approvals might have commenced. Confident is more around having your project designed and developed, recent quotations or waiting on approvals and contractor selection. And very confident might be that you've got it all ready to go in terms of approval for planning, you've got your feasibility study, your business case approved, you've got quotations and contractors in place. So you're really ready to go with your funding. Now we've just got a question there around, can you add more rows in the form? So Emma, did you want to just take that? Because that's probably pretty...
Yeah, we've responded to it in the
chat.
chat.
Beautiful. Great. Sorry, it's just zoomed up on my screen. Awesome. So this is so this is what the infrastructure section looks like. It is very straightforward. So you can see there that you're uploading landowner consent or permission forms, you're uploading recent quantity or surveyor report. So there's lots of, and you've got room there for your cost estimate. So it's very much just uploading what you've got. So I think that's very straightforward. We'll move on to capacity and capability of your organisation. And I know there was some questions about this before, and Emma kind of went into this. So, but this is your time to shine. So this is about proving or showcasing that your people and their talent are there to manage your project. So it is word limited, but you can link to things like LinkedIn profiles. As Emma said, you can upload CVs or, you know, collated files on your team or the project team. But I just encourage you to put roles, your systems, the support that you've got for your project teams in your organisation, because that's not visible to the assessment panel. So really making that really clear with how your organisation, because everybody does it differently, goes about project managing. If you need specialist support or you're buying in expertise into the project, talk about that as well here. And if you're looking for things that might showcase, you know, there might be projects in your business that you've got that you're most proud of, or that really showcase the talent of your staff on past projects. So anything like that, we're sort of saying that would be a really good document to upload in those two project reports. Great. Okay, I'm going to move on to budget now. So this, as Emma said, is up to 3 years, but this is only one table in the form. So the expression of interest has only got one table. So this is for the life of the project budget. Ensuring that you describe this really well, and you can add 3 additional rows into this costing table to break the cost further down. We always recommend building in a contingency. It's best practice in granting, so up to 10%, particularly with the volatile kind of economic crisis and labour shortages and everything that everybody's experiencing in projects at the moment and in life. So just being really clear with your total budget, your Commonwealth contribution, your applicant co-contribution, and the New South Wales state co-contribution. So you can kind of work through your table. It's very simple and shouldn't hopefully trip anybody up. So the next section is risk management. And again, they've even simplified this further from the last round. And this is looking like, in simple terms, risk assessment is defined as that probability of event multiplied by its impact. This is a really simple table in terms of key risk issue and then detailing a mitigation strategy. Always helpful to link off to things if you've got things in your organisation that are already in place or how you manage risk internally. So risk, you can break this down, and I've often seen people break it down into program risks, implementation risks, organisational or activity risks, depending on the project. And then if you've got an infrastructure type project, these usually link directly straight up into that milestone table. So answering those key deliverable questions. So that's pretty straightforward. That's it from us, I think, Fiona, and I'm happy we can talk through some of the questions so that people have it on the recording if that's useful.
I think just to add just a couple of things for people's information. So we can answer, we've got time now, should you want to stay forward to ask any questions. I think yes to the slide deck being provided. I think that's right. Maybe Emma, is that right that we can share that slide deck?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Right. There are also, I think we've shared the link. There's a whole lot of information on the website, including a frequently asked questions piece. So some of today's questions we might use to add to the frequently asked questions later this week. If you have an urgent unanswered question, please use the DRF email address. So maybe Emma or Annabelle, we can pop that in the chat there. Just if you've got an urgent question that you need answered this week ASAP, feel free to contact that email address directly as well. But our slides will be shared as well. So that's probably enough to say, well, we've got a bit more time now for Q&A, any other questions, and I will stop chatting. I think I can see one already on joint submissions.
Yeah, did you want us to take that?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so basically we would encourage joint submissions, and whether that is within agencies or potentially even government agencies collaborating with each other. We don't, to answer your question there in regards to the evaluation, we don't have specific evaluation criteria in that, for example, we're evaluating the strength of the partnership or anything like that. So it would be assessed alongside other submissions that are from, single agencies or single parts of an agency. So we'd be looking at it on its merits. But I think where a joint submission might have perhaps a bit of an advantage would be in the capability section. If you're drawing on different capabilities from different parts of your agency or from multiple agencies, then that's going to come through quite strongly there. And I think also, even just in terms of a project logic and the general impact of a project, if you can demonstrate that there's a strong collaboration piece there, and that will also sort of feed into, one of the things that NEMA are really looking at are, different types of governance. And so you'll sort of see that in the systemic DRR project criteria as well. So it would certainly be looked on very favourably, but we don't have, specific evaluation criteria that would assess it. I think in the way that you're meaning there.
I'll just call out some other questions. So what are the expectations on what is required to release the funds? For example, a business case or other documents?
So it depends what you mean there by it. So if you're talking about the, could you clarify actually, sorry, who asked that question?
Joseph, you're on screen. Yeah.
Joseph, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I'm asking about the documents required to release the funding. Look, I'm working on the Hawkesbury and Nepean Valley flood evacuation program.
Sure.
And our business case, our final business case, is due for submission by the end of next year, end of 2024, for assurance. So I'm just curious to know, in order to release the funding, What are
Okay.
the documents we need to submit or substantiate?
So Yusuf, are you talking about the co-contribution element here, as in we've got a co-contribution lined up, but it's not going to be kind of confirmed until the business case is submitted?
Yeah, like our expectations is we need the funding to be released before even we have that business case ready. Like our expectation is if we are approved, for example, then we're expecting that we will receive the funding by July 2024. And that's roughly 5 or 6 months before we submit our final business case for assurance. And our aim is, ask for some funding for some accelerated works or some some detailed design components apart from the investment decision, because the investment decision will be by end of 2024. So I'm just asking, like, what we need, like, to get this funding by July 2024. Are they going to ask us for the final business case, or?
Was this in reference to being risk informed? So being able to present the case for why? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, we can present the case, we can present the justification and demonstrate the need. But I'm just curious to know if there will be a requirement to say, okay, we'll give you the funding, but we need your final business case.
Okay.
That's the question.
Right.
Yeah. I think it depends on how your business case kind of fits into your application. Sorry, just got some background noise there. If everyone could go on mute. Thanks, Yusuf. Yeah, it depends how your business case fits into your application, I think, Yusuf. So if it's about co-contributions, the Commonwealth can accept in principle co-contributions, i.e. our business case is not going to be signed off by October, November next year. So I think you just need to make that clear in your application. If it's about, there's a key piece of data or something that's available through this other project, but again, that's not going to be ready until October, November. The reality actually is that while we expect funding announcements to be made in July, for round one, the reality is at the moment we're still setting up funding agreements and implementation plans now. So we would hope that funding would be flowing from, let's say August, September next year, but that is not necessarily a given. Sorry, Yusuf, I'm not sure if we've answered your question there. Feel free to email the DRF inbox as well, and with a bit more detail, and we could try. Yeah,
no problem. Thanks for your answer. I mean, I need to discuss this response with my manager because that was a question from here also. So, and then if we need further information, we will email you.
Yeah, please do.
Another question is it required to attach a program logic as part of the EOI, or is it required for the final application? So I would just say it's, again, sorry, that was Yusuf. So yeah, it's required in the EOI, and then we don't have the final proposal from the Commonwealth Government yet. So their form will form the final proposal form to be done in January. But we're assuming that they will also ask for project logic.
Yes.
Okay, so just a question here. So if the sorry, I have a background noise, but if the EOI is announced by end of January, then those successful EOIs, when they have to submit their full application, is it in April or?
April, yeah. So there'll be a window basically between end of January and we believe end of March. So there'll be about an 8-week window there where the final application will be submitted. Our goal is to make to reduce duplication of effort for everyone that goes through to that final application. So we're still working with the Commonwealth on what their application process looks like. But for example, we would be trying to make all of the data available in your EOI form, at the very least available for you to sort of cut and paste or build your application so that you're not sort of starting from scratch.
Another question is, thanks, Joseph. What is your view on agencies submitting multiple scaled options? For example, 2 individual options where one more complex option builds on another option with a smaller scope. So you're saying submit 2 applications, one building on the other in this round?
Yeah, we might need a bit more clarification on that one.
Lamia, I think it was.
Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Slavomir here. Pleasure to meet you all. I will just turn on camera so you will see there's a human being on the other side. So the question is about this. Pleasure. The question is about the scope. So, for example, in the business case, you may have the business case around the different way of delivering projects, but as well the business case can be built around different sizes of the project. In the current financial austerity measures, the money is scarce. So is it an option to come up with basically options for delivery? So there can be a minimal scope, think about as a minimal viable product, or we could actually deliver something that is a little bit broader, delivers more objectives, delivers more benefits, but obviously costs a little bit more. It adds up to the element of evaluation because you may potentially have 2 submissions from the same form, from the same team, but just wanted to gauge your feelings on that component.
Yeah, okay, it's a good question. I think I'll give an off-the-cuff answer, and perhaps there's one we can address in our FAQs as well. But the form will not allow it. Basically, in the form, you'll need to put a dollar amount in for your project. So, I would suggest kind of if it's a little bit like here's the bells and whistles version, everything goes well and it's a large-scale project, we get as much funding as we'd like to get. And then you've got a kind of a really scaled down version. One way you could approach that is you could either sort of say, here's the full bells and whistles version, this is what we will do for that. We would consider a scaled down version of this. And then both the RA team and if it goes into the New South Wales application, the Commonwealth would then know that. So we can also, because we'll need to keep a bit of an eye on the total size of the New South Wales application. So that would allow us to look at that and say, okay, they've asked for $20 million here, but that doesn't fit alongside, all of the other asks in New South Wales. So we're going to go back and say, can you please submit this as a $5 million request, for example? So I'd say that's the best way to sort of deal with that. Hopefully.
And would you think to cater for it through 2 submissions or through 1 submission, just to make 2 different submissions costed differently and slightly described differently? Or would you think to bundle it up in 1 submission with extra narrative?
I would suggest 1 submission, but with a little bit of detail on if we scaled back to this size, this would be the impact on what we would deliver and what the outcomes and the outputs would be.
Fabulous. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the question. Yeah.
There's another question. Could we provide any information on whether projects approved in round 1 were granted the co-contribution waiver from the Commonwealth Government? I'm aware of one in Queensland, and
is that publicly available?
Probably not the waiver, no.
Yeah, well, let us take that one on notice, and we'll check in with the Commonwealth on that. And if we can publish that, then we'll do so in our FAQs. Yeah.
Question. Do we know the budget allocated to New South Wales from Chad?
Do you want to take that?
So I guess we don't have any specific allocation. So the DRF fund is 200 million for this financial year, for this round, but that's nationally, so divided between the states.
Yeah, so it's not, there will be a floor for each jurisdiction. The Commonwealth will announce that, I believe, when they open the application. We would be aiming far beyond our floor. So, but there's no specific allocations based on, for example, population and risk. It is very much a merit-based process across the jurisdictions.
We've got another question from Yusuf. Will there be a partial funding approval, i.e. if the government approves the need, but they only provide 50% of what has been asked?
Yeah, good question, Yusuf. It has happened in the past where the Commonwealth have approved a project in a state application, but not at the size and scale requested. So they might say this organisation's asked for $20 million, but in terms of the $200 million allocation, that just doesn't fit alongside everything else that has been deemed as suitable. So in that case, they will come back to the proponent and say, would you accept funding at a reduced amount? And then it's up to the proponent to say, yes, we can deliver a $10 million project as opposed to a $20 million project, but this will be the implications in terms of the outputs and the impact.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's all of the questions at the moment.
Okay.
I think if there's no more questions, everyone might get an early mark.
All right. You must have done a very good job and no one has any questions about the
Excellent. Good work, Ali. Thank you everyone for being here. We can share the slides and I think the email address was shared in the chat as well. So good luck. Hopefully this year's round will be very, very successful.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Fiona and Ali, and to all of the DRF team, and thanks to everyone who's been online with us today. And we look forward to seeing your EOI submissions.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.